Sipe zura mare me don don ye jeze dozo gyun la bu jie da ze yan la zhu jie yang de song zhu da jie zhu nie mo nie long le jie jia zhu zhe zi jin ma re me ze dong ye nyu gu jie nie jun ze zhe zhe na Dāni dājī sājī dāsī yudhī lūdhō jāsī dōyī gu jī rā jī dāng jī nī jī rī mī sī jāmbī yāng lō dī ārā bācā nā dī ārā bācā nā dī ārā bācā nā Zedin chūjī chīrā yuzī jī, dāli tīmū mīmbā rāsī tī, kātān tīñchū shūnlū dōbā yī, lōchū bōbī tāng, zā dō sā yī dō yī jī, shō yī jī yī mī Dawa Chaba Ribi Kujo Sanje Kunjo Papa Yase Su Samu Davi Jila Sovandi Shijo Dambi Chunga Adi Cha Katan Timbi Mimbo Chudenji Nenjo Naji Kuchi Suna Su Katan Lama Nala Sovandi Kanjin Shinde Suji Zonga Mada Ribi Wanshu Jetsaji Dongan Dembe Dabo Kijuji, Yose Jiba Jela Sowande, Josun Gunde Lama Doje Chang, Hanla Gande Shenye Cuzone, Chodan Temo Mujo Sunzebe, Zhenje Lama Nala Sowande, Raja Soro Gyula Daye Mi, Geza Taba Zhebe Zhong Jo, Zebe Zhebe Take Zeba Ye, Sanze Shenye Nala Sovande, Jewa Gyundo Yada Lama Da, Zheme Chuje Bela Long Shuje, Sadan Lanje Yune Rozone, Doje Change Go, Nyundo Yesho, Sanje Chudan Suje Chonana, Shanchu Badu Dane Josuje, Dagi Chichi Jibe Sonanje, Lola Pinshe Sanje Drubo Sho, Sanje Chu, Suje Chonana, Shanchu Badu Dane Josuje, Dagi Chichi Jibe Sonanje, Lola Pinshe Sanje Drubo Sho, Sanje Chu, Suje Chonana, Shanchu Badu Dane Josuje, Dagi Chichi Jibe Sonanje, Lola Pinshe Sanje Drubo Sho. 다대선 말해가지고 되지 아니 달랑리 친에 정해 저게 라마 저게 샤예제 아니 소마제나 저희 추루고는 제바 때문에 거지 아니 가서 랑리 손대 주고는 뒤뒤지잖아 아니 소사지 장으로 중원로제 아니 당 거스 보바 제면에 아니 랑게 되지 나가 되냐라 덤버 투병 벌어 랑리 집에 라마는 저 건등에 지 랑게 되지 나가 되라 미바제
In general, when receiving the teachings on the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, or the Lam Rim Chenmo, there is a custom of reciting 6 preparatory rites or a George Chuduk, and followed by supplication to the great Lam Rim lineage gurus. However, we are unable to fulfill all those prerequisites. We are reciting the abbreviated Lam Rim supplication verse to great Lam Rim masters, lineage masters. So having done that, now at this point, let's take our time to visualize Buddha in front of oneself, surrounded by all the great Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and other great masters.
아니 제 랑예 맞게 대진 소소게 대사기네 대연도 소소 기본의 대사기네를 되게 산나만 도와체 근데 양시 자체와지라 아니 랑다 근데 랑게 자체 파마집에 타입에 선제나 근데 랑다 지속에 근데 덤버 투병 변되라 아니 타입에 선제 당제 된다 주사래 내도 요상게 되지.
So then imagining that you being yourself in their presence, and just try not to think of the place where you are right now, but rather imagine that the place where you are is so vast, and it's the entire sentient beings can be contained in the place where you are right now. So therefore, you are surrounded by all other sentient beings, including your own parents, and having a similar wish to gain, receive the teachings and gain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of other beings.
Teachane rangin dune shebe temba to be on both sebe shuja sanja nala tsechi de tebache tebe sendeje and randa ranya you sanje de dala niji chamba teba de niji jangana and then also kama yin sonji mi bache da.
So then, imagining that all those great beings in the 10 directions in the space and cultivate a very strong faith or devotion to the great beings, and similarly try one's best to cultivate a compassion and extend your compassion towards all other sentient beings. So with this cultivation of faith towards the great beings and cultivation of cultivating a compassion towards all sentient beings, let's take a couple of minutes to meditate with cultivation of faith and compassion.
다 드네 경로 치바 체닝하네 하는 강센 바샤기 취선들에 아니 경로 치바나 이게 라랭 간데 도베인 세서네 상조 런제는 발라 아니 투상 거수 세진데 잖아요 조베 상제지 보면 영원인데 더버지 제게 인선에 다 단다들이.
So with these motivations, what kind of teachings that we are receiving, having received the teachings, and how we can follow the practice by receiving the teachings, not only just but receiving the teachings, but try one's best, how one can put one's best to actually put all the teachings that we have received in the practical use. So therefore, one should have a genuine aspiration to receive the teachings, and having received, then one should have a genuine wish to contemplate and meditate and cultivate a genuine desire to gain the state of enlightenment as soon as possible.
당가 저대로 최대 콘센보 임바 최대 콘야보 임바데 라마데 세대 임에 따고 인자네 동bol로 최콘 센바 템베신 제바비 채와잖아요 동바 투비 엄보네 랑게 제제 짜이라마다 라면서 제바이 채와데 가리여레 세대 ene 사제 동보.
So the first outlines here speaks about whether the teachings has a noble source or not. It depends upon the teacher who actually gives the teachings. if so therefore in order to understand how the teaching has a noble source, one must understand how the particular teaching can be traceable to the teachings of the Buddha himself. The teachings of the Buddha, it should be traced back to the teachings of the Buddha. So then second will be the second outlines, which is the showing the greatness to the teachings in order to engender the respect for the teachings. Is so now how one can prove the teachings that we're receiving is something that is so authentic. It has a noble source, right from the beginning, the teachings from Buddha himself all the way to the one truth guru. And the second outline will demonstrate that.
Lama Tsede Sonshangi Jung Pitabotena, and Tella Chini Chibicola, Richeburasana, and Lama the Juningaji Gumbate, Sanjata Zubi Sanja Komotabi Cheta Yinsane, and Matsoye Chini Chibicola, and the Sanjataji Yins and any Kimo Chibicon, Chini Chibures, and the Sajisumbatic.
So then this will then cover the third outlines, that both teacher and the teachings that is given by the teacher. Similar wish to working for the welfare of other sentient beings and now to establishing our entire sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. So therefore, we as the receivers of this particular teachings, we must also have a similar wish to receive the teachings to establishing entire sentient beings to the state of enlightenment.
That's a suggest about the Dambango Lama Chitati, Ni Jungo Yet, Lama Sanjasala, Kantajan Tigre, said, suggest about it.
So then how these teachings will lead oneself to the state of enlightenment will be then spoken or will be demonstrated by the fourth outlines, the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions.
The Telesai Sajini, Tangas Shaker in Nangachi, and launches our Shenya then be Sudan, then Lochita Riba, and Gagatan Kanadogre said, the Nazolaricham was young.
So the actual teachings of the Lam Rim Chenmo are all, encapsulated these two very important outlines, which is relying upon a spiritual teacher, which is the path of one's, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and having relied upon the authentic teachers, how we can train ourselves by following the teachings given by the teacher.
다 동보지서 다 님보지 달림비 취되라요 니지 랑지 나자라 게바지서 님보는 증어지 다 동보지서 다 님보는 증어들라 송지 주부 투모 주부 총에 다 투모에 나제르마 냐선렌지 주부 전다 투모에 나제르마 냐선렌지 주부 챔비 나제르마 냐선렌지 다 동보니지서 다 주부 챔비 나제르마 냐선렌지 될라 자이사지 송지 대전은 주부 고담바 센제 코나덴바 센데 제다 지비치 센지네 시발라 로지 다 동보니지서 다 센지네 시발라 로지들라 야 사지 송지 센지네 로발라 로고비 전세 로바레레올라 로베 사지 만주바 덴바 로발라 로베 림바 니시바스 다 동보니지서 다 로발라 로베 림바 니시바들라 야 자이스 마레스 사지니제 안 테바침보 찔러로세다 제바도 도제 테발로세지 다 동보 알레 다 동보텔라 사지송 상선제 로발로 론데장와 근데 장내 제세제 남버서 손에 인제달로비 추스 당아저기 내가 사지 가키되어서나 아니 상주 생기 남버존에 아니 제세제 쇼발로 어디 다 제세제 쇼발로 가르로 그래 제세제 쇼발에 가르려서나 제세제 쇼발에 바로데 심바 주리 될로 그래 세기 아니 상주宣传인원 쇼발 제세데스 상도들이 jel레도 이 동의 쇼발
So now we are on the particular under the we're on the particular chapter of how to train the Mahayana in general. The explanation is how to train the Mahayana in general, which has the 3 sections: the establishing desire to learn the precepts of the spirit of enlightenment, taking the vow also conquers children after establishing this desire to learn the precepts, how to train after taking the vows. So we are under this particular chapter of how to train after taking the vows. That's just the 3 outlines as well, but we are under the third outline, the process of learning the bodhisattva's conduct, which is perfections.
that's Tangaso Tero, Masuki Tije, Shanchuki, Sanche, Jesse Shoba, Logore, Jesse Shoba said, Geshe, Jesse Shoba, the Paradishiba, Jude said, Maso, Jesse Majokone, Hako Deche.
So, having generated the bodhicitta, we always find in the text by saying, having generated bodhicitta, one must engage in the conduct of the bodhisattvas. What is meant by what is conduct of bodhisattvas here? So, conduct of bodhisattva here primarily refers to the process of learning the perfections. In other words, 6 perfections.
That Tendriki Parado Shimba True Nola, Jesse Shopa, Yonsu Zuba, Divres, and Dusitella, Mandra, 2 years, Pechanga Mandra, Jibate, Nabate, so Reve.
No,
Nabate Maledas also.
and
Lama touch number times, there were. Ale techen tangji dube changen nesi terwe. Tene jiba ten. Dako ten na jese ji shopa kante je na pare shimba chuden dubere. Ani chuden duba ma se te changen gore. Ani changen se te le chuye se ne changen se ne jiba ten le de ta. Kozo pesa lo ne ngazo te sonja de chuji rejil do ngazo pebi te. Sonja chuji re ani login da tangen.
So here it says all the bodhisattvas' deeds, the practice of the bodhisattvas are all encapsulated within the 6 practice of 6 perfections. Not only it's encapsulated within the practice, but it is a fixed number. It says it doesn't require more than that, and nor less than this. So it's the 6th perfection, the practice of 6th perfection is a fixed number. So we are on the outlines of the fixed number of perfection based on their subsuming the entire Mahayana, which is on page 107.
That's ngaso te shegor da de pase to de ngaso te je peje shegoro jimba de sutrin zoba ani garere zunri something ani shirok se de jendo sutrin de pase to bo de shegor de shesona ani jimando de deja yongro. So
now here 6 perfections. Probably we all are familiar with these 6 perfections. The practice of generosity, morality, patience, perseverance, joyous perseverance, and concentration and wisdom. So those are the 6 perfections, or also known as the conducts of the bodhisattvas.
Teacher Tanchi Dubala Dubi Tangenes. Country tongue every sesona, a passion to the country tongue every senate, Joatero, can digger sesona, and data launcher near Bala Machashi, Manibala 20 Minewa, Launcher Metawadan, De Yana, Loba so and Nube, sitting legend, Della Cubadan. Saint Mayimala, Tene Shoyi, Donhela Zubi, Mejowada. Geyu Shawa Chintawa Shijoyang, Joye, De Mejoa. Shenejin Nanjo, Mutobata, Hatongi Nanjo, Mutoba Gamba, Jugene, De Joy Techen Tanchi de la. 마 창son 존나 딩이 되레셔 대제단지 되라서 대다 장 신주게 림바 주진 텔레마와 미고테 알레와 대바도 제로로지다.
So let's read through the text. The fixed number of perfection based on their subsuming the entire Mahayana. Says, you are indifferent to resources because you are not attached to those you have and do not pursue those you lack. Since you then have the ability to safeguard precepts, you adopt the respect ethical disciplines. You adapt and respect the ethical disciplines. You are patient with the suffering that comes from the living beings and inanimate things, and you're enthusiastic about whatever virtue you set out to cultivate. So you do not get dispirited by either of this. You cultivate a non-discursive yoga of meditative serenity and non-discursive yoga of insight. So this six comprise all the Mahayana practice through which you advance by the six perfections. This practice in the stages by the means of six perfections, and you do not need any more than the six perfections.
So here
it talks about how the first practice of perfection, which is the perfection of generosity, coming into picture. This particular chapter actually explains. Because normally the problem with us as ordinary beings, we have a strong attachment towards one's resources, in other words, one's wealth. And we engage in all kinds of actions in pursuit of achieving the resources that is not possessed by ourselves, the resources that we do not have. So this is the problem that we have. It is not that we are not having this indifference to the resources that we have and the resources that you lack. So if one is able to, or able to shun this attachment towards resources and one's body and so on, then it is a it will be much easier for us to engage in the practice of moral discipline or ethical discipline.
아니 신체도 신체 많이 배우기 내체 가세 용서나 아니 될어 메세비 세파 용해야 돼 아니 즈비 냥나데 송어로도아 제가 강에 모셔가지라 파시주의 동 가서 돈에 가는 제도가 세계적으로
So then this will then be followed by whatever the suffering there may be. Maybe this suffering is caused by sentient beings or inanimate phenomena or inanimate things, in other words. So you will be able to, tolerate. The tolerance towards such suffering will be strongly present within us.
되지. 라바도가 좀 이게 로장 카토야. 강라다게 펜다다 레와차가 소소게 펜가세게 따샤나야. 아니 단다 될 수련의 슈체 용에 들라. 요인데 도서는 로장게 냥내게 때와땡게 들어요. 도서 즈비게 냥내 때와래더라. 로장데 조체해도 즈비 냥내 로라.
So this actually, it's related to the practice we find in 8 verses for the training the mind. in the verse where it says, "Kala dagi pendava." When someone whomever I help, or in whom I have helped, I have placed great hope, harm me with great injustice. May I see the one as a sacred friend. So this is, as a very strong, strongly related to this particular practice.
되지. 다 개유셔 가르치를遵守나네. 좋아해야 존중이 양래는 되그래. 로아. 가서 저거 gel어 줘야 로. 존중 양다 gel어 저거 걸 줘서宣ju이 되로아.
So then also we find, this will then be followed by the practice of joyous perseverance. If you're able to tolerate whatever the suffering that maybe arises, whether the suffering out of suffering, one is experiencing suffering due to sentient beings or inanimate objects and so forth. If you're able to tolerate towards that, then the joyous perseverance is followed. Because the joyous perseverance is, again here, one of the driving force for our practices. So therefore, we find in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, what is meant by joyous perseverance is you have a joyous perseverance towards, the joyous perseverance here referring to joyous perseverance towards cultivation of virtue or practice of virtue.
되지. 당가서 돈이를 째지도 내비 땡엔진에서 유를 째지도 같이 내버데 아니 땡엔진게 냥래 상대게 냥래 야보여비 따로와. 또 봐서는 저도 담에 또 땡엔진 신내라 송도 이나 가인의 이제 돈을 센텐차 여보다 센 같이이나 땡보여보데 상대게 냥래는 되고로.
So here now discursive, it says a non-discursive yoga of meditative serenity, referring to Tingezin, which is samadhi, the practice of samadhi. So whatever the practice or meditation that the maintenance of one's single pointedness within the chosen object of meditation is said to be the discursive yoga of meditative serenity. Of course, in this particular context, in this particular chapter, and the discursive yoga of meditative serenity is referring to the single-pointed meditation on the emptiness. But when we, in general, when the discursive yoga of meditative serenity doesn't necessarily refer to the single-pointed meditation on emptiness. Whatever that single-pointed maintenance of whatever the single-pointed meditation on any kind of object that is chosen by one's own object of meditation can be, referred, can be, considered as the practice of samadhi.
되지. 다음에 또 비시네 다음에 또 하동선에 다녀자세 지발에 못도 다음에 또 비가 시내 못도 내줘다 아니 하동이 못도 내줘세나 카동마다 싫어도 코로나 맞아잖아 아니 다음에 또 비 아니 못도 내 가서 아니 상대지 파신 다음에 또 비 싫어지 파신세나 아니 싫어니라 파신이 맞아셔로.
So therefore here now you cultivate non-discursive yoga of meditative serenity, referring to the meditative concentrations or the samadhi. This is the fifth perfections. And the non-discursive yoga of insight, referring to the wisdom realizing selflessness. Which is the wisdom.
대다게 장 파제 다 태바침비 냥내 쟁해지나 델레 마와지 파시 줄레 마와지 그 말에 델레 마디베지 요 말에 녜데 냥내 저거 대 파시 주버 가로는 이거 문두세 치지 요 말에 매와 있잖아요 태바침비랑 다르지 냥서내서는 네 파시 주는 마디베지 매와 있잖아요 파시 줄레 마와 냥내 그 말에서.
So if one is Mahayana practitioners, then one's practice is one's practice must be subsumed within the six perfections. Therefore, it says the fixed number of the perfection based on their subsuming the entire Mahayana. So everything that we practice, so long as this belongs to the Mahayana practice, there is no such a single practice, Mahayana practice, which doesn't belong to one of the six perfections.
되지. 파신 주버들 상추宣주 영어写버스 이동이写버스나가 파신 주버들 아니 조소나 네 라니 이동 차와 신 이동 네 나바 탄치데 저부 피송 줘봐 영화데 파신 주버를 말해봐 조베 산지 고마타야면도
So here therefore the sixth practice of sixth perfection is is required for fulfillment of one's own purpose and that of other sentient beings. Because without engaging in those practices and perfecting those practices, it is not possible for one to gain a state of enlightenment.
다때 가서 뒤 시제기로 도대쟁이로 가서 시제로 된 사람 런셔가 메가 당 저기니라 메조 당 내조 넘바 메도바 티첸 타다 데스에도 셰서 대단한 티첸은 주번 되버다 시주 냥스 메네번 되버네 개오 손도.
So here the ornament of the Mahayana Sutra states the entire Mahayana is subsumed up in not delighting in resources and reverence not being dispirited in two ways, and the yoga is free from discursiveness. So given this, it is a contradiction to want to enter the Mahayana and yet to reject the practice of six perfections.
강이 제파티 동도도 이들이 그냥 제시메스 수도 맞아고 말해. 대제대 대가 아니 단다티 타마들라 대단한 대체는 주번되어봤던 시주녀선님바 메되바는 개화생에 대해 단다 나르긴 제바제다네 하상 생기조도 하상게 가세 가서 또바 또비 땡인지 찍고마도 아니 제 고마레서 라요데 파신 졸라서 뭐 된지 메가와 시와로 그래서 대체는 주번 등에 이바 강실라 바로 심바 주냥 양서 내가 말했으나 나게래서.
So here the verse after the verse from the ornament of Mahayana Sutra, then it says, given this, it is a contradiction to want to enter the Mahayana and yet to reject the practice of perfections. So why it is as contradictions? It is again here. This is directed towards the Hashangs. In other words, the followers of the Hashang or the Hashang, where the Hashang has stated very clearly earlier by saying that you don't, in order to gain the state of enlightenment, you do not need any other methods. It is said, other than the non-discursive yoga of meditative serenity. So non-discursive yoga of meditative serenity alone will lead oneself to the state of enlightenment. So that is what we are referring to. So it's because if this is the case, then you're completely contradicting to the practice of Mahayana, because given this, it is a contradiction to want to enter the Mahayana and yet to reject the practice of six perfections.
라바다 당가서 되게 뭐로 지 상하는 주보면 토사진의 다는마도 제세지 쇼발의 렌저로는 조베 산제지 고바타게 생긴 뉴뉴로아 그래서 내가 디시는 다소아이나 배대 난게 자기도.
So there, sometimes we also find an individual who claim that the practice of Vajrayana, following the practice of Vajrayana, is a swift practice for state of enlightenment, swift practice to gain the state of enlightenment without going through the process of trainings of the six perfections, which is also contradictory.
Lama toje namba tanchibi on the zenaya, and Pajadi Shimba Tugri, sorry. That long scenery, Sanjay in Royagi, to scenery, he on the scenery, Pajatu, Tobacco, Yamari, Jimandona, Dangamari, said it.
So here the fixed number of the perfection is in terms of completeness of the path or the method. If one is unable to practice entire six perfections, then you are not actually completed the practice of six perfections. So therefore, it is essential to have the completeness of the path or the path of the method, which is the path of method you're referring to, the practice of six perfections.
되게 내가 가르치는데 파신 쪽에 소소소소 이제 어디 요거래 단다 파신 쪽에 매나 연구 말에다 예바도 파신 쪽 거래 그비 내가 내려서는 이제 해대 저거라 아주 가르치는 뭐 뭐지 시에고 나서 전화해서 그러와 내려 파신 쪽에는 연구 말에다 예바도 되면은 내 너무 말에 되면 내 치에로 그래서 깨치죠 되게 되시는데 아니 그런 파신 소소소게 이제 어디 요거래다 예바도 그야 돼 이제 저 만은 가서 한번 넣어보듯이 일을 주디 강다 여바 진행의 셰바체 셰네니 샤월을 줘야 돼 한번 넣어보서게 좋다래.
So although we will find the individual explanation of each and every individual explains, so the explanation later we will be elucidation. We'll find this elucidation the later on of the six perfections, in other words. But at this point, what we are emphasizing here is we're emphasizing more on how important it is to practice complete practice of six perfections, in other words. So this is a way of propounding the teachings towards the followers of the sharp faculty, because the followers of the sharp faculty or the high intellect, someone who possesses high intellect, first they understand the importance of having such practice. Having understood very clearly of the importance of the particular practice, they will then engage in a detailed practice later. So it is for this purpose. First, we are in this Lam Rim Chenmo. It talks about how important it is for one to complete all the six perfections without going through the actual explanation of the six perfection individually. But this explanation of individual explanation will be followed later.
됐지. 달로인다. 당연히 터스비 유라 이 말에 터스비 이전로셔라 마차 바 라마 터네 제바데 노알라 공베 델레 마차바다 제 셔로 손데레 이제 몇년에
Right here now it says the path, the method for not being attached to the resources that are your position in is generosity, because you become free from attached to your things by becoming habituated to giving them away.
제 하바다 가서 단데 레톤보 어떻게 네 만냐다 소데 따따데 단데 터스비 베나 류에나를 류동롱셰 지여바 코노제 콜라 템비 아니 라다 젠세나레 야 이드 젠세나레 간지 되게 차단 냠가 젠도서데 아니 터스비 유세나레 롱셰세나레 류세나레 되게질레 때네 니 강에서 오라 다 이제나 세나세나레 간지 지베데 지 메메 흐르도데 마차와데 가르싱고레세선 차생이진도 오라.
So normally the problem with us as ordinary beings is that we have a strong attach to the resources that are already in our position, right? We have very strong attach towards the position, the resources that we have, and with this, then we intensify all other negative thoughts and emotions, such as hatred, anger, so on and so forth. It is all, sprung from the attachment towards the resources that is in one's own position.
동안라 공부차서나 아니 차바데 제그레송도 동안 세제로 류동로시 강동나 메메르지 이제미지 소수 지청부진 대표서 멀티게 깨쳐마리 삼바 코로나기 촌나라 일을 차선 쇼체모메와 아니 베데 류동로 다 제세지 상주스메기 남바지디 류동로시 제바 선전 방화 상해지로와 되게 냐네 슈침벌에 비거라 지 류나라 용수 줘보면 가서 냥도 입이 소리지로 쇼 용수 줘봐 강하게 냥도 입이 손하지마도 담보 젠데 이제도 산나도 손나데 레고야 말.
So therefore it says now, it says, you know, uh, because you become free from attachment to your things by becoming habituated yourself, habituated with giving them away. But if you engage in the practice of generosity, properly and correctly, then you will be free from these attachments. Just like bodhisattvas, when they engage in the practice of the generosity, they are delightfully and willingly give away their own positions and even their own limbs and then body, part of their bodies. They are willing to share with any other sentient beings who need it. And looking at all those positions and the resources that they have, it's not just belong to themselves privately, or this belongs to me and this belongs to my and so on and so forth. But rather, the bodhisattvas, whatever the resources they gain, they look at the resources as a common resource of all other sentient beings and willing to share his resources with all other beings.
라바데 상추 선바게 저와 슈침보 요데 유라 저와 슈침보 영에들 잘라지 파 제소에는 파게데 렌로테나 가야지 해야지도 뭐 탐에바이 차생원데 용거래 예전에 저쪽에 시기 희지 베게 유도 희지기 저와 슈침보 가서요나 파쇼들 소속이 되바데 페쇼들 제사소나 소소를 가능 슈쳐와요 렌로자와이나.
So this is how the practitioner who actually practice a great deal of generosity, the practice of generosity very perfectly, will have a very delightful feeling. Will be delightful by giving away the things that is meant for someone whom you really wanted to give. If someone accepts your gift, you will be so delighted. So you'll have a very extraordinary, delightful, feeling that you may experience by engaging in such practices of giving, practice of generosity.
가서 탐해봤더래 맞아요. 양 탐해봐 차생원게 요거래. 양 지금 가서 탐해봤으나 내가 돈 벌어서 양 수수 계시는 돈을 대부분지 대봐야서 돈을 야지 필요디 시로나 가야더래요. 진짜 연구도.
Although that we as ordinary beings, we do have certain, attachment towards our resources. But when we give away something that we really mean to give somebody, we have a very, extraordinary feelings, the delightful feelings. We all experience that, particularly that when we are, making an offering to one's guru. That when the guru accepts one's offering, that you will be so delighted.
되지. 다 대치팅이다. 싫어지. 이 마타바 토비 된도 제비 나이 도비 터네 수팅데 겐롱게 담발라 네발레 마레 네비 네발라 레제 타이 나이 탕치 민족비 싫어 수팅이냐네.
So here next it talks about the practice of ethical discipline, which is the method for restraining yourself from the distractions of distractions of trying to possess what you do not possess is ethical discipline. For when you maintain amongst vow, you do not have all those distractions for making a living.
당한 속에 배치잖아 저게. 그게 배나 소속의 류동롱쇼 계속돼 저 파쇼들 제발 사람에게 나는 슈체벌 해비걸 파쇼는 취소설 알아다에게 차선다 되게 나이지는 요거 말아.
So here let's take example, if you have the genuine willingness of giving away all your resources, including your own body, the parts of your body, and so on and so forth, then you will be very free from anything that is from others, attachment from others. desire of having something from others, receiving something from others is completely freed.
라바다 가서 이제 통치대로 변는 내조 바레스네 지 샤젤 되는 것도 되뇨 샤요도 제 잘라 알아다네 뒤 된도는 배전전에 나이 제마도 로그에 민도 그 수ting이 냐네 예비다.
So particularly that when we think about the practitioners who are practicing, engaging in solitary practice, solitary retreats. So for them, then their ethical discipline will be so impeccable because they have a fewer desire and fewer mundane activities. So which naturally lessen their, breaking their vows or ethical disciplines.
수춘 세대 가디에는 송생지로 고고로 임바 세대 동생지로 고고로 진짜 제용이 찾으시나?
So the sutrim or the ethical discipline is something the thought of restraining from something, and the practice of generosity is the thought of giving away with no attachment.
되지. 너희 민족이 싫어지. 다 생제면 동이 터네 저바데 너바시비 동해 탄시지 이 민족이 싫어 손도 저비냐네.
So then here the method for not abandoning living being is a patience, which speaks about the patience, the practice of patience, because you do not despair at the suffering caused by harm or caused by the harm others inflict.
되지. 대개 단지로 시드 미리네시나 현재 담바 따오 쇼세대로 가세기 춘네바시나야 단타야 버시냐나게 따토에데 가리리 저비기 과체된 뭐에 따로 맞소이나 치토멘질로 저투고메와.
So here now, therefore, we also talked earlier about how important it is to, even when someone harm you with great injustice, may I see one as a sacred friend, right? Sacred friend that we find in the 8 verses of the training the mind. So here, this is how one should be when it's considering oneself as the practitioner of the patience. Because for us at this point, let alone that we will have such consideration, but we're not even able to bear even one word. Even if someone speaks about one, negative words towards you, we're unable to be patient about that. When you immediately have a thought of retaliating what someone has said about you.
맞소기 파 맞소 생체기 쉬어받듯이 신주지제 상추선비 저와당 랑된동의 신주지제에 나도 저비 진의 저퇴 걸어마로 산제 저기 계신 점에서도 맞소기 된다라 깔려지는 허자전의 제대로다 맞소 추선 얘기 자기라 봐 약가서 쇼선의 마음을 로네게 지로 맞도 저비 년에 쉬우지면 카테자 퇴 걸어마래.
So here now, without having the practice of patience, it is not easy for us to withstand our practice. We cannot withstand with our practice, because to practice properly, engaging in the proper practice of Dhamma, particularly the Mahayana practice, it really requires a practice of patience. The great deal of practice of patience. So therefore, here now the Buddhas have gone through 3 great countless eons of accumulating merits and working for the welfare of other sentient beings. And they're trying their best to pull us all up towards the liberations. But it is due to our own impassioned practice. We're not even able to practice continuously in 24 hours. So we are unable to free, although the Buddhas are trying their best to elevate us from this suffering nature of secular existence, but unable to do so because due to lack of our own practice of patience.
배당아서 데려와 파마기 뻐글을 째와려도 잔치 동지게 상추선 받아서 가서 째와 채워요래 다 라자도 가서 파메 버글 라자 저올에 잔제 동지 상주 선바도 가서 라자 저 체그리 다 가서 이 쇼발로에 때만 텔레도 쇼발로인데 뭐네 전에 저비 냐네 쉬우지 매나다 제네 크토야 제네 말어.
So here, if we were to compare the sense of caring and sense of loving kindness, if we were to compare those loving kindness and caring towards ourselves by one's parents and the bodhisattvas, the love and caring from the bodhisattvas are far more greater than one's own parents. And similarly, if you were to compare the advices we receive from our parents or the bodhisattvas, it is far more profound and useful for us, the bodhisattvas advice. So, however, regardless of how much advice that we may receive from them, but we are doing something that is completely contradictory to their advices. So, therefore, what that is happening is actually indicating that we are really a lack of patience. We're a lack of patience. So, therefore, in order to engage and follow those practices very carefully and precisely, the practice of patience is really required.
咁么就帮上
10 minutes break here.
所以不是修行面多中日照连接年的肩膀的上界深度面的别我也这个能到心罗是不说也当不着面对那个那样大样面哎呀他帮着的周一的帮着的다디 가사 저버서 다 전지 개와피비 토네 전지 때 전지 zambal에 데레 페원지 쇼로 송도
So let's read through the text here. The method to increase virtues is choice perseverance, because you increase them when you joyously persevere at what you're undertaking, or at what you undertake, in other words.
대체 대단 가서 배드 대중에 가서라이바 전주면은 싫어로던 파신 로봇들 로봇 전주면은 약게 지금 말해 잘라르마서는 배점에 동데 강의 주 데미지셔서 집어지리 싫어야 보여서
So when engaging in practice of the six perfections, the perseverance, the joyous perseverance is needed. The joyous perseverance, without joyous perseverance, even though that you may have the wisdom, that your wisdom will not be bring their result. It is not effectively bring their result. So therefore, the practice of joyous perseverance is needed. As we mentioned during our previous teachings, that without perseverance, and just like you have a very valuable object that you are not making good use of that, but you're just putting them in the box and lock them inside the box. So you're not making a good use of it. So therefore, you need a perseverance.
나 드버장이 터네 니데 손도 삼대지 녀모당 싫어지 시지 넘버정이 싫어 손도
So that here it says, the method for clearing away obscurations are the final two perfections, because the meditative stabilization clears away the afflictions, and the wisdom clears away the cognitive obscurations.
대진은 가서 지당 가서 데려와 가서기 가서기 되게 돈을 제거 때와대 다 시리데 녀지니로 다 되니게 너무 몇 번송에게 되라 아니 전부 템포 지제네 아니 싫어지려죠 근데 지당 가서 러버송 시에디 수준제 러버데 사기나게 템포체 아니 땡에제 러버데 매유 수보나게 템포체 아니 싫어데 아니 제게 라찬나이 빼자고로 신동으로 지도 거이나
So our main target of our practice is to overcome those two obscurations, cognitive obscurations and our afflictions. Those are the two that we are targeting towards to clear away. So, so therefore, in order to do that, in order to cultivate the wisdom which clears away the cognitive obscurations, we need a very strong support from our meditative serenity or the meditative stabilizations. So just like we have a saying, that moral discipline is like a foundations of the ground. As a ground, it is analogous to the ground, and this meditative stabilizations are like a body, our body which one can use, and the wisdom is considered as a weapon that by using one's body and using this, the weapon can cut through the trees and so on and so forth.
That's it. Mumbo all the Java you don't did. This is a Shindu thing, this is a Shindu thing, Taji Roa, the Sanjay Sala Doya Senare, Lang Senare, Yane, Tal Sena, part of the Shimba to Negre Setere.
So then here it says, thus the perfection are fixed as 6 in number. So we talked about earlier that when it says, when speaking about transiting oneself to the state of Buddhahood, or when one is trying to being on the path to state of enlightenment, or to method which enables one to establish oneself into the state of enlightenment, are all those practices or methods and skillful means are included within the 6 perfections. So now the next is the ornament for the Mahayana Sutra states. So this verse is actually it summarizes the explanation we have gone through today. This particular verse, it says, non-attachment to object is a path, very clear, and another is a restraint from the distractions of obtaining them, and non-abiding, not abandoning beings, increasing virtues, and clearing away the obscurations are others. So then here it says, the following explanations produces strong conviction about the 6 perfections. In order to avoid being dominated by the distractions of the sensual object, you need generosity that is free from attachment. So we as beings who are born in the desire realms, we subconsciously or innately have a desire towards sensual objects, the 5 sensual objects or the 5 sensory objects, form, sound, tactile sensations, and feelings, and so forth. So the fault we have due to having an excessive attachment towards 5 sensory objects is because the way we have attachment towards the five sensory objects is we are actually, exaggerating the qualities that actually possess in those five sensory objects. We are exaggerating and adding those exaggeration on the five sensory objects and having attachment towards that, which then then bring forth all kind of negative thoughts and emotions. So to prevent sensory experiences, here it says, to prevent sensory experiences that have not occurred, you need ethical discipline that restrain distractions by things that are pointless, referring to the deeds that are wrong by prohibitions, and or the counterproductive deeds that are wrong by nature. So we are always remaining, if you really analyze carefully, we're remaining under the domination or under the control of these two deeds that are wrong by prohibitions or deeds that are wrong by nature, or the things that are pointless or the counterproductive. So here now, to have a perfect moral practice, perfect moral discipline, or the ethical discipline, it's one should have a contentment to whatever that one has, the clothing, shelter, foodings, and so on. So whatever that we have, that we should be contented with that. And without having such contentment, and it is difficult for us to actually observe moral discipline carefully, moral discipline perfectly, in other words. That's all. So, given that there are a great number of living beings whose behavior is bad and who are constantly in danger, and who you are constantly in danger of meetings, you need a powerful conditioning to patients as a remedy for giving up their welfare.
Zebati Ganon Rosado, Senjing about the trauma, Tanning Ella Nagiri, Mazo de Papa Labado, Mazan Papa Shenzi, two Jedi Jamadan, the essential Tronsing, the Dronshi in the Gala, and then Kepa Trauma Bajilla College and the Senja Trauma Sanjay Sale Kune, and then Tata you do the Senja Mountain Mindro, and then don't get more Rava, and nga so lo de ma show with the logic and do the logic and kanji shangchu sambo mombochi yenjo tube ge tangja ma je wa yena ani kale shuji je be kala sinje drama de shoba nge kase sanja sala ko no zoya menge tentri ge kala zoba taw de me wa yena ne kange cheba de logic to no do.
We have some stories of the bodhisattvas that regardless of how much the vast number of sentient beings are established to the state of enlightenment, or establishing them on the spiritual path, there are still countless sentient beings, infinite sentient beings that are still engaging in negative deeds and not willing to restrain themselves from engaging in negative deeds and so on and so forth. And we have there's some stories entails that even the bodhisattvas sometimes, get dispirited by not being able to establish an entire sentient being to the state of enlightenment, because they are not willing to change themselves uh, in terms of their behaviors and so on and so forth.
다 준준게 냥래래 준준게 냥래 가세게 진진와 근데 랍치와 뒤쪽에 편에 통용도 걸어 아니 라바도 아니 겨울 준비 좋아지 제우도 좋아되잖아 가사되니 루바볼 깔래매와 보기 중중 제문을 인바티 지바로와
So here now, the perseverance, the joyous perseverance is really needed. Joyous perseverance is the one that really supports our practices, continual practices, because without which we will not be able to, intensify our practices. So it will not, drive us towards the the development of our spiritual practice and spiritual realizations. So therefore, the joyous perseverance is said to be a very important factor, important practice that is needed for development of one's spiritual practice.
다 녀몽고 내발 상대 당대 사베 시지 좀발라 아니 싫어거 템비 시나 아니 신주 장에 봐 첨보 때 손도
So now, in order to increase virtue in terms of great number of actions and is practiced over long periods of time, you need joyous perseverance that has intense and long-term enthusiasm that comes from the reflecting on the benefits of the virtuous actions and etc. In order to suppress afflictions, you need meditative stabilization, and to destroy their seeds and the cognitive obscurations, you need wisdom.
네. 때로 맞아 싫어를 세차해와라 네 나이 롱데 매버거라 나이 롱데 공에데 땡겐제대로와
So in order to intensify a stable intensification of our intensifying our wisdom, we need this concentrations, the single-pointed concentrations, which is the samadhi. Because without samadhi, and your wisdom will be wavered by the winds of wandering, mental wanderings. So therefore, you need this single-pointed meditative stability.
싫어도 가서 마음에도 빼잖아 때로 제마도 만약에 얘나 코노 녀모이 사베 옛날에 나이고 사베 카테장이 되어도 돈이도 싫어 코노를 하러와 얘나 땡겐제데 때문에 이나 싫어이 단지 세워나기 내가 지금 말와
So although the wisdom is the direct remedy, the direct antidote towards our cognitive afflictions, our mental afflictions, without having a support from the meditative stability, the stability from the meditative serenity, then this wisdom alone will not be able to act directly towards the ceasing of negative thoughts and emotions, afflictions, in other words.
파신 소속인 레시던데 슈치마 저거 코 소속 어디 되고도 단단 양가로 되신데 다 로바송을 대비 장에네 세딩 아주 저다 로바송대로 되게 아니 가서 로바 수트지 로바 땡겐지 로바 싫어지 로바로 예송이 냐네 온데 샤나야 파르데신 두 장에를 송도.
So then here, the fixed number of the perfection based on the three trainings. Three trainings here also referring to the three trainings referring to the teachings of the discipline, the teachings of the trainings of the discipline, or the trainings of concentration and trainings of the wisdom. So all of those. So here now it says the perfections based on the three trainings. All of the even the 6 perfections are also included up within the 6 trainings, the practice of 6 trainings.
다 장애반에 다 추천이 라바노는 가른 뒤거래 라바 추천이 라바 가른 뒤거래서는 되래 추천이 라비 고네 추천이 이라지 대양 론쇼를 메타비 짐바여나 양다바 렘베 되네 추천이 초소 손도 짐바데 추천이 초래 손래.
So here now the fixed number of perfections based on the 3 trainings. It talks about the nature of the training in ethical discipline. The first of the 3 training is the practice of ethical discipline.
제가 가서 때 세보 세장 고거래 파쇼들 싸워다 리론셰 대바 견소도 파쇼를 땅투아이나 피겔을 네바시 생에 때도 되나 용어 말아 지나 용어 말해.
So here now, if one is able to engage in the practice of generosity, having strong determination to giving away everything that we possess, including one's body, parts of body, and so on and so forth, then your harmful thought will not exist in one's continuum. There will not even a slightest harmful thought can be sustained within one's continuum if one is able to engage in such a practice of the practice of generosity.
라바테 고소 과치몰이 말 메게 주봉이 추진로 지라 산나도 아니나 메게 주봉 서제는 뭐च्या데 신진장을 내바시야 손으지로 예전에 파쇼벨 자와다 진비 냥네 슈치모여나 아니 메게 주보데 파쇼들 줘야게 결론코는 말해.
So if you have such a strong motivations of giving away everything of your resources and yourself, one's own body and so on and so forth, and with such practice will then naturally will abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions. The 10 non-virtuous actions will be abandoned as by product of engaging in perfection of generosity.
양코로 디 지바코로 추트ኛ네 추트코로 지비냐네 카팔로셀로리 그냥 이거로 그 신전에 대비게 타지데 편바줘야 진짜데 그 지지는 되면서 삼면도와.
So all this practice, the generosity practice must be associated with the practice of morality. The practice of morality must be associated with the practice of generosity and so forth.
됐지. 다 양다벨랑 셰바를 하면 셰바 소비 저바송에 됐네 되게 코로서 저바데 추정이 진바데 추정이 초래 아니 저바데 진비 코가서 추정이 코레서도 알아봐 추정이라비.
Again, here's a precondition of the training in the ethical discipline is generosity. See, very clear. And because once you have the generosity that is indifference to resources, you can properly adopt patience, because the patience of not retaliating when scolded, etc.
내가 저때 개성의 최기성의 개론의 제 년내적인 도서기 아니 파지 치 매제다 지게做了 시시했다나 아니 파시시했던 거 말이 시했던 하면시스 아니 팔롱되나 아마 칠롱되나 팔롱된 거 말이 초전 하면 줘 아니 상주 장할 문제세네 매게 로지드네 아니 대장할 문제생이 가제 수가르네 잖아요 판넬에 지고나 편세해야 돼요 개성주 취지세도 일단 시에가 하면서 소세야 되는 개성주 취지세도 주고도.
So this is also known as, whatever when someone scolded at oneself, whenever when one is scolded at oneself, one will not retaliate, or based on what someone has done something bad to you, and when someone talks bad about yourself, and one is, deliberately one is maintaining one's patience and practice of patience, not retaliating what someone has said bad things about oneself and so on. So those are the one that actually one of the conditioning of one's own, flourishments of one's own virtue and practice of six perfections and so on.
또 저바세의 제단에는 따로 치친소에게 따슈로 저바로 매제다지기 취슈나 맞들 주보기 따야 보여서 나가 말어 대나기게 아니 손센데 휴침이 여나야 따면은 카페 말어 저바데 따려 코레 손도.
So here now the practice of patience is said to be strength of your moral disciplines, because if you do not have, although that you may have a moral discipline, but if you do not have a practice of patience, then your moral discipline will be weakened because there's no strength in it. So in order to strengthen your moral discipline, the practice of patience is crucial.
주 코로지 더 선대네 생질 하자인라스 선대게 이제 하바데 아니 코로랑 선대지 파신 주요는 선대지 하자 코로랑으로 왔습니다.
So then it says safeguarding your properly adopted ethical disciplines. So then next is the meditative stabilization, is the training of the mind.
다 싫어네 싫어지 하바랑이 로다 시다 가서 싫어지 하바데 싫어지 파신도 코로랑은 지구로 코로랑으로.
So then the second training, the trainings of the meditative concentration, and the wisdom is the training in the wisdom, the third trainings.
전주는 하바송가라 또be 신주된 게데스 다 전주 강가를 간지지는 게 단지 집발을 낸거 간지 빼서나 다 전주에 적된 전마도 배도고 말어.
So then here it says, as for joyous perseverance, it is included in all three trainings, so that perfections are fixed in 6 numbers.
맞아 개위쇼를 좀 발라 전주 세월에 단도 매개와 쇼라던 지탱이 내가 저월은 가서 베비 타닐을 누리 세월만도 전주 세월 말어.
So here the joyous perseverance here really refers to you joyously persevere or persevere in practicing, engaging in the virtuous practices. In other words, what if we are engaging in the negative actions? We are engaging in negative actions. That is not a joyous perseverance. We do not consider this as a perseverance or the joyous perseverance. Rather, it is an effort. We put an effort to do something that is bad, and so forth. But it's not a joyous perseverance. Therefore, the Shantideva stated in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, what is meant by joyous perseverance? The joyous perseverance is that we persevere towards the development of one's own virtuous practice, virtuous deed. That is what is meant by joyous perseverance.
타마니는 넘버니 지네 송차 라양 또 셰소서 대단한 소데 대단한 도디제 제노.
So it is included in the three trainings, so the perfections are fixed in 6 numbers. The ornament of the Mahayana Sutra states, the conquerors are rightly presented 6 perfections. In terms of 3 trainings, 3 are the first, 2 of the 6 are connected with the final 2, and 1 is included in all 3.
다 디오기 될 동시에 셰티가는 가서 lense chu go ne chang ge se de ge ma don si do ji re sha de ta na ten phe son zo ba chen da shi ge ran da yen je de yong su zo ba chen da shi te pa gan la ne to ji no ba ji ni da den be lo ba gan ju bi ten da 대체다 터당 허바는 용수 조바시바 당 듀바시바네 바로 파신 주니드 셰바샤라 샹세지 냐네지 네 탕지지 동이베 대라니바 첨보 마네지 바도 삼바 샤오 송도 데레 동이러자.
So this is again summarization of how important it is to, take the whole practice, the practice of 6 perfections, without acceptance. Where it says, by a certain kind of excellent life, you bring to completion, either others or your own aims. You practice, you practice, certain kinds of trainings by possessing a diversity of methods, depending on which vehicle you are in. Understand in this way that the 6 perfections comprise and bring to completion the above perspectives on their fixed number, life aims, the Mahayana, the methods, and the trainings, and then reflect until you get a deep conviction about how the 6 perfections are the summation of all the key points of the Bodhisattva's practice.
다 소소게 지 선어도 신주제 아니 지 소사 제자제 아니 손데 던데 안다 파신 주마도 냐네 때마도 다 조사진 민도 세기 녜파 템보 많이 지 봐도 아니 갈레자는 베체 제쇼 송도.
Therefore it's stated now, one must put an effort, to engage in the practice, and until you have a strong conviction of that, other than 6 perfection, there's no other practices that are necessary for oneself. And this is how what one should be, continuously engaging in practice until you gain the conviction of the importance of engaging in complete practice of 6 perfections.
되지. 다 용생이 동로지래시. 냥랭이 동로지. 제양 동보네 코알레 민다와다 메파비 주네 니데 론셔레 차바다 친레 차바오 스데레.
So then the next it says that furthermore, there are two causes of not initially transcending or rising above cyclic existence: attachment to resources and attachment to home. The remedies for this are generosity and ethical disciplines, respectively.
됐지. 내가 가서 거로 변으로 코알 코세바네 코알에 차비용하기로 와. 차비용하게 가르를 차거서나 가서 데 뇌진제 된사나리 지주 생제사나리 야 랑데 제사나리 가제 랑쇼라 차바 제쇼라 당나선 가제 차단이 용하게 코알 코에 됐다 무슨 치료로.
So when speaking about being within the cyclic existence, which means revolving within the cyclic existence, is due to our attachment. It is due to our attachment towards this cyclic life. We are revolving within the cyclic existence. We have attachment towards our environment or the being within this environment. Or we have attachment towards one's loved ones, and hatred and aversion towards someone whom you dislike, and so on and so forth. It is due to all of this attachment and aversion which actually binds us within this unenlightened existence. In other words, samsara.
됐지. 디 니보네 짐바당 수춘소 송도아 단지 주에 되니 콜에 타미치여다 콜에 야파미 징인데 종에데 아니 론셔를 차바다 친을 차바니 버레 디 니보텔라 아니 론셔를 차비 니보텔라 제비 냐네레 아니 친을 차비 니보텔라 추춘지 냐네레 송로.
Therefore, the remedies for this are the generosity and ethical disciplines. The generosity is the antidotes towards one's attachment towards resource, and the ethical discipline is attachment towards one's house, home, and so forth.
되지. 맞죠. 제다이나 친을 차와서 돼 맞죠. 제다 로조도 친이 치매 버려도 쇼서 단지 제거로 와. 그래서 친세대 소속이 던저기 친세대 양시 최소양 부수 도비 걸어야 배듯이 따당야 두자 용식을 던저 말에 내가 최초대 차선 수준도 해야 되더라.
So here now, when speaking about ethical discipline is the remedy, the direct remedy towards attachment towards one's home, then again we might think that, oh, why shouldn't I have attachment towards my home? This is my home. We may have this kind of ideas or this kind of wrong thoughts. That's, we're not really saying that home is not necessary for oneself. Rather here, should not have an excessive attachment towards the home that we have. That is what is meant.
但是说呢，要不就嘛多呢，就老人全部娘来就说呢，别咱们里面个别说的去差着过些个了，这真的嘛了。
So it is important to understand the context and actual explanations in the Lam Rim Chenmo, because then if you have wrong understanding of the meaning of the explanation, then we might think that whoever is practicing Lam Rim Chenmo should give up everything, one's home and even the world where we live and so on and so forth. However, it's not so.
你不等下的卡，说了等的卡罗也真没嘞。你不等下的牛毛衣，卡上了罗呢，牛毛衣是下节了，卡的家的罗，当然的，身体一点罗，让人给着罗。
Was playing well when speaking about applying antidotes. The application of antidotes is not somewhere else. Application of antidotes must be applied towards one's own negative thoughts and emotions. That is what the remedies work. That is how we we actually eradicate our negative thoughts and emotions through application of antidotes.
对起，但年纪怕着他们是把拉多比就呢，你得送的。甚至就露出就冬天当，结束了有人不让也用是叫我送的，第一年不呢，热巴当真正的送的。
So it says you may raise about this attachment once, but still turn back without reacting, without reaching the end. There are two causes of this suffering, from the wrongdoing of living beings and becoming dispirited at the length of time you have the length of time that you pursued virtue. The remedy for these two are patience and joyous perseverance, respectively.
对起。他等着的知道，我说那对的时候去的搞啥，那看的家们当然前面头，但阿里提讲，对我给设计的，讲到的了些我领导，真的得啥，当然到那把了就没人把当，对把的没把浪，你们记大不大意，做那些总是现在我他妈呢，让那都比，至于你不。写比热巴当专职结尾那对切我送着的。
Once you understand how to sustain disregard for all sufferings and harms, as well as an enthusiasm which views even an eternity Eternity has thought it were one day. You must practice them in various way. If you do this, you will then produce the patience and joyous perseverance that are capable of functioning as remedies to what caused you turn back.
다 가서 대다양 가서 세버로와 변한 가서 저거지 변한 리텐지를 야볼해와 이나야 지 겨와지 저거이나 지 토만 고주번에서 타마신 봐도 루메투에 양지 강에도 체외나야 때 돈에 제문도 사대데 아니 준주당 제페 카테자마투로라.
So here, normally, if you examine our own practice, right, when you engage in certain practice, we are unable to complete the practice perfectly, right from the beginning of one's practice all the way to the end. It is due to the lack of our practice of patience and tolerance, patience or the joyous perseverance. Because due to this, because of the lack of practice of joyous perseverance and patience, and we are unable to, carry out our virtuous practice perfectly from the beginning to the end.
this 지도 그러고는 요거래 배나 조바들 샴비 고차세 그래 샴바다 쩌와기 파주들 고차 녀보 때도 그래 아니 샤당기 카테자도 그러 근데 저는 아주 조바세디 도와질 우지 구보우주 소리지 개차 말어 샴바다 제외 아니 셔러기 조세네 아니 파쇼텔라 나주 가세 때서는 샹츠기 비게텔 돈에 제통인지로 고고로.
So here now the Zeba, the practice of patience is also known as the armor, which can act as armor that will prevent us from any harms of negative thoughts and emotions inflicted upon us by someone. So therefore, this practice of perfections, the practice of patience must be associated with the practice of love and compassion, love and sense of caring for others.
대zam비 샹추 셈비에사 대zam비 샹추 셈비 쇼바 마제 다티티지 데 게존라 가시 튠튠라 제세 총하다 강강비 랑라 조슈 총이 제세제 동보 슈바네 마 동보 슈바 마야 바드 냐바리 슈야 바드 말로바 쳔보 묘와 나데 저보다 전주지 명화를 잡아 레는 마샤베 레노 손도데 너자.
So here's a very beautiful advice is given here. Thus they are extremely crucial. Never mind the matter of the bodhisattva's deeds, even with regard to present cultivation of virtue. There are many who starts out, but few who do not turn back after a while, because first their forbearance for the slightest hardship is tiny, and the second, their enthusiasm for the path they cultivate is tepid, and this is the result of their not putting into practice the personal instructions associated with the patience and joyous perseverance.
대다 가서는 라송도 샹주스셔 다디디스 가서 계정을 춘춘 제나야 제세조 칼레지 가서 나사지 정조조의 담지고 계정 추추로와 가서인.
This advice is really for us, right? If you really look at the advice, because when we're engaging in practice, then we get easily distracted by anything. Even one slightest condition will make us distracted. So we are ready to give up, and we are unable to complete the practice and so forth.
세자 단대대 어디 텔레스만도 강강빌랑로 조슈충에 맞추지 강르지 저셔는 조슈충이 제제 고중에 빼먹어도 타마청에 빼먹어도 손도.
So therefore he says their enthusiasm for the path they cultivate is tepid. It's a very little, it says, in other words. It's not sufficient at all. That this is the result of not putting into the practice the personal instructions associated with the patience and joyous perseverance. Very, very clear.
되게 내가 가투르잖아요. 즈비 편의 준주의 편에서는 즈비 당 준주의 명하를 마셔비게 저를 손도아.
So this is also now the result of not understanding the benefits of the practice of joyous perseverance and the practice of patience. And then also it's clearly mentioned this is the result of their not putting into the practice the personal instructions associated with the patience and joyous perseverance.
다 겨와 주는 밑에도 주든 제게에나야 촐라면도이 촐라 조이 줄니 데선로도 바드 말로 장 취사유 줄니 데 취선로세데 가서 지 게서 조장라마 호나 취사고 촐라 조르세 디전들니도.
So then he said there are two causes for letting your virtues go to waste, even if you do not turn back after a while. After a while, the destruction were in you.
생계이 미발라 메네비 넘버 인와당 싫어쳐 송대니리.
That attention does not stabilize on the virtues of the object of meditations.
And 가서
last rooms.
데로 되게 가서 tempa tempo 메나 야제로에 메와 베나 강가세 전에 tempe 신데 마데나 쇼도리 그만 쇼비 지바로 아니 대야 싫어기 접대 거를 마도 싫으면아 유통했게 메와.
So all this, our attention does not stabilize on a virtuous object of meditations and a faulty wisdom. It says, now, when one is engaging in the practice of engaging in the virtuous practice, and one should be very mindful of one's virtuous practice. Its practice must be conjoined with the cultivation of mindfulness.
대년번에 상대다 싫어때 세제의 인위 되죠 소장 되면 봐 송신 나리비 되는지 되라 로도 넘버 집이 싫어 마제나 주도겠네 라바 나 추네 로바시비 싫어 손도 내 러자랑 러자.
So there are remedies for these two meditative stabilization and wisdom, respectively. Meditative stabilization is a remedy because it is said that even virtuous practice such as repetition, or in other words, recitation of the mantra and daily recitations are senseless if your attention wanders elsewhere.
다들 가서 들어와 다 쳐서 가서 집안으로 다 칸에 많은 정보 진단하여 선배이 대부터 이제 돼서 뭐가 돼 상대 세나리 tempo면 봐 아니 싫어기를 집어서 보면 봐 대적이 제래도 하바도 그런 것인데 나리비 되네서나 가서 지 라벨 하바선을 되네서나 소바 대다기 너희들 싫어기 너희들 제토에 싫어도 제보면서나 주도도 너네 아니 로타 제발 소바 용어로 그래서도.
So therefore, it's it's always, even we try to recite the 6-syllable mantras of one round of malas, and our mind is always wandered. Our one mind is taken away and distracted. We're unable to focus, although that you're reciting, but your mind is somewhere else. So it is all due to the lack of this meditative, lack of the concentrations or the meditative serenity.
대대 메디슈지 니법 메티쇼 밤비 니벼 온데셰비 장에서 손도 사제지 최 단지 루비 지위네 지 장에네 파신 동본이 땡겐지 소스 접배 대지게 매위 파신 상된 줄라 파신 상된 줄라 대라 때네 Platon Gana, the Konani Tobanju, Shero, Sinja Mimba, Jesse Timbi, on the Shen be Tangene, Kashi be Sombadan, Dan Rao. Dene Papa Tomeji, Sheba Robert Single Zombie, Gobata, Sheba de, Shedula Nimba Jawa, Ne Chawa, Tango, Sondo. Oh, they but Losarach.
So wisdom is remedied because if you fail to develop the wisdom that fully delineates the topics and the collections of the Buddhist knowledge, you will be mistaken about what to adopt and what to cast aside, even the obvious, and will then conduct yourself wrongly. This fix this this fix the number of perfection and six in terms of there being remedies that eliminates the class of phenomena that are incompatible with virtues. The number of perfections are fixed in six based on the fact that they are foundation for the achieving every quality of Buddha. This is because the first four perfections are preconditions for meditative stabilizations. So through this four, through this four, you accomplish meditative stabilizations, the perfection of non-distractions. Furthermore, when you cultivate insight based on this, you will know reality, fixing the number of perfection at six terms of their beings, uh, uh, concordant with the helping living beings to measure they're similar in meaning to the third one, perfecting the complete fulfillment of others and mentioned earlier. I was explained here the noble Asanga's assertion as presented by the Master Haribhadra in the long explanation of the perfection of the Wisdom Sutra, 1,000 lines.
도체 다데다 다마서야 데레 이사베네 대송 겨 쳔비 아니 게유틀라 데네 아니 라지 스제 단제제네 제세 주셔바 로버치 파르도 심바 조냐설레네 아니 조베 산제제 고바니와니도 더니바 니 지자네 신절로도서 토바 쇼오세네 호하도 몰라니가 제로치다.
So let's do the dedications by means of accumulating the merits of three times the merit. So may I cultivate the practice, may I engage in the practice of six perfections and complete perfectly and gain the state of enlightenment as soon as possible for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And may all Buddhists and Bodhisattvas in 10 directions please bless me to be able to do this.
Logi jini sabi gewa de dena dowa kina gambi cheba jizan losan chabai tenbi jimbo rindu seji jo sa jibi shoji mendo zhang zhiro ninji nide jimba de sanje shindu mide biwai Drogen nanda shinla shubha shu jiwa kundo yanda naman Jemi chuju bela lanshu sadan lanju yunde razon Doji changi gopon yunda shu yidan guru Minde laga naya daya emi Dene rindo bele soni Kada yamba ganshe saba de lomi mare ke don joma nandre jaye ombo da je dama sembe tsera kundo jambe yanje tsebe je zone debe ba sa nanje ne be nanje shura Zeve zhangye dangye jin zhuye yue jin min ba si xin jia yue tenpa yu rin zin ju jin tenpa rin chen chu ge ma jiao 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 nyang ba ji wei shu de ne jin ju chen bu yi rao ju wa bin de 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 se wa xie ba zhu se jin jiao yue min zhong chen de 列诸相救能觉人别将他的能觉一来别的。教育在把人都讲究的，能让主别听见主席，给见世界门当明明跟，才让更多家园光发。能当这我们就见，刚才这帮出了就是。世间住了正法的原则，土地能觉道都主席。这些将此手有就解，就是那面国财绕点睛，那个城里数据解放。老僧点别专门扫松经，昼夜明赛道。念就解，光着绕月过月心刚子，平常的马林永远的，现在在往定在当作，小别身体不多，定就解，江边八月接到亲朋，更多上不点样的见。铁道跟着就是道路是给我的大堂前绕道，就说西边叫我当街就我刚了就到俺吧，大仙给月早晚的跟，如果是这绕道我就，好，呀，推荐
Thank
呢？
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you.